All right, PSO community, this is Broadway. I just want to make a quick video talking about some of those basic settings you can use in-game, out-of-game, and optimizations you can use for just a better feeling, more responsive PSO. First things first, disclaimer-wise, if you're somebody who likes to make montages or thinking about making montages or anything to do with montages or recordings where you want them to look good, this is not for you. This video is more for the best settings in game to reduce input lag, input latency, and things like that. And it's just gonna be a quick one, short one. So if you're a montage maker, forget about this video, okay? Because your game's gonna look like real bad when I'm done with it, okay? Trust me, but it's gonna feel great. Basically, if you don't think I know what I'm talking about, for the past 30 hours in this game, for the most part, I've just been testing so many different settings and so many different PC optimizations. I could make this video an hour long, all right? Which is why I just want to do a quick one, maybe a part one. If anyone's interested in seeing more, how it could help them, like let me know. We can get really deep into it. We can make a part 2, part 3, whatever. I got a lot of information I need to get out, okay? A lot of information that could help people, especially now since we're going to 8 field. We're going to 8s. There's gonna be a lot of settings in here that are gonna help you with 8s fields already. Like this is not even the tip of the iceberg we're gonna share with you today. These are just the basics. So let me know if this helps you, if this, aids you, and if you want more. All right, so right away, first setting, full screen mode, every day, all the time, no matter what. Any game you're seriously into and serious about playing, you're always wanting it on full screen. Never on borderless, never on windowed, especially if it's a competitive game. You're losing frames, you're gaining input lag, just run full screen. All right, guys, so this is gonna be the longest part of the video, but I'm gonna try to make it as short and sweet as possible and as easy to understand. So let's just get right into it. Resolution, very subjective to who's playing on it. But from testing alone, 1920 by 1080 is the worst res you can play on. And if you have a monitor that can support higher than that, I haven't tested for that, but I already can tell you right now that you're getting worse input delay. Don't play on anything higher than 1920 by 1080, even if your monitor can support it. And honestly, don't even play on that one to begin with. The average latency for 1920 by 1080 for me was around 1.3 ms, which is quite a lot. Not counting in-game spikes, which we can get to in like a more detailed video on how this game can spike. But short and sweet wise, don't play 1920 by 1080 and take it down notch by notch in resolutions to try to find the one that's best for you. Now, if you just want the easy answer that I'm gonna tell you right now, there's 2 reses in this game that are gonna give you the best performance. And those reses are very simply 1366 by 768 and 1280 by 1024. Now, there is a 1360 by 768 that's right next to 1366 by 768, but they have the same performance. 1366 just has better fidelity by just barely, and it doesn't do much. You can pick either one, 1360 or 1366 by 768. Doesn't do much, doesn't matter. If you're someone who's used to playing standard resolution 1920 by 1080 and not stretching it at all, then 1366 by 768 is the res you're gonna wanna go to, because that has the lowest input latency while also giving a 1920 by 1080 feel about the game. And this is something that you're gonna have to just test once you're in the game. Like open up your game, go into a practice tool, go on 1920 by 1080, then go to 1366 by 768, and you're gonna notice it looks similar camera-wise and how it plays wise and the look of it wise to 1920 by 1080. Except it's going to be way more pixelated and it's going to run better, okay? But you are giving up how good the game looks for how good the game runs. That's always going to be a big part of this. All right, so the other res is 1280 by 1024, and this is a stretched res. And if you're not familiar with what a stretched res does to impact your game, I can explain it a lot more in detail if I make a part 2. But what you need to know right now about it is simple. Your camera's gonna look different, your sensitivity is going to feel different, and the player models and the ball will also seem faster and harder to react to. This res is something that's gonna take anywhere from a few games to a few days to get fully used to, depending on how long you've been playing on non-stretch reses in this game and how used to your settings you currently are. But my recommendation would be to play a few games with this res and see if you enjoy the benefit. If not, then 1366 by 768 is what you should stick to. So render resolution, this setting, just don't touch it. Just leave it at 100 no matter what. I've done a lot of testing with this. It doesn't do anything but make your game look a lot worse. No matter what resolution you're playing at, it is not lowering your input lag, it seems, to any degree from my testing, and it makes your game look substantially worse, even at 90%. If you've ever played a game like Overwatch before, you'll notice this setting in it, but in that game, it actually has a purpose, and it seems to do its purpose in that game, which is allowing players to stay at their native resolution, 1920 by 1080, while lowering the in-game render resolution so things look more pixelated and more blurry, to save frames, to lower input lag, while also being able to allow players to stay in their native resolution. But in this game, it just doesn't work, okay? It just doesn't work, and lowering your resolution is just, I mean, to say it's better is an understatement. It works. One works and one doesn't. Just don't touch your render resolution. Leave it at 100. All right, so your FPS limit, for 95% of you watching, just leave this at 240. The more frames the game is getting, the less input lag the game is experiencing, and therefore you're experiencing. There's going to be a handful of players watching this whose PCs are in the sweet spot where they need to limit their FPS in-game, and that's something like I can explain more in depth in another video, but just right now, just leave this as high as possible for as smooth as possible gameplay. All right, so in-game settings, this is going to be one that's going to surprise a lot of people, but you're going to want to set everything to low. And I'll go ahead and answer what you guys are already saying one by one. So texture settings just doesn't affect really anything. Low or high, there doesn't seem to be a giant MS response rate difference. But if we're going to go ahead and lower our res, if we're going to lower, these settings, there's no reason to have this on high. There's no, like, it just doesn't, you're not going to see a difference, especially if we're lowering our res, guys. So just turn it off. Just get it as low as possible. Most players probably already have that on low. Let me just type out shadows really quick. They really deserve their own video because there's a lot of in-depth stuff about shadows. Me telling you to turn shadows on low probably just sounds like blasphemy to some of you, probably most of you. I assure you that you having shadows on isn't helping you see people behind you better. It's not helping you see the ball better. It's just become a placebo for you, okay? Shadows are killing your input lag, and it's not worth having them on at all. And depending on if you're red or blue side, shadows can actually be hurting you more than helping on the 6 and 8 map. I've run a lot of tests on those, and that's something I can definitely talk about more in another video. So foliage is basically like textures, just have this on low. You're not gonna see a difference in game unless you're running this on a higher resolution, then it'll look better, but you shouldn't be running this on a higher resolution anyway, so just have this on low. Effects quality, very similar. This is one that for some reason can spike your input latency when just running this on high with nothing else on high. I was on 1 ms, which is crazy. Keep this on low, you're not losing anything. So anti-aliasing quality is an interesting one for sure. I've seen players say this is what they run, this is what they love. They love when the game looks smooth. The game might look smooth with this, but it's actually not playing as smooth, which is unfortunate. The more pixelated your game is gonna look, the better it's gonna run, which is unfortunate, but here we go. Keep this on low. Post-processing quality, same deal. I've heard a lot of players like this setting, but there's really not enough information on it, so I ran some tests and it's killing your performance, guys. It's killing it. It's murdering it. Don't run it. All right, so when we talk about the view distance setting in this game, it's strange because a lot of players don't seem to understand what it does, along with me. Most players will see this setting, turn it to max, even if it's the only setting they have on max, because they think it's helping them see things farther away, when in reality that's kind of what it's doing and kind of what it's not. What it's doing when you have it on epic or high compared to low is just things that are farther away are rendered with more fidelity. You're able to see them easier, they're less blurry, they're less pixelated, things like that. So with playing around with this setting and testing it a bunch on different field types, I've noticed that there's something that I'm gonna call essential assets, and these assets are always going to be rendered in no matter what your view distance is, and this is gonna be the ball, the players, and the crossbar and the goalposts. You will be able to see these basically at all parts of the map, no matter what your view distance is rendered at, just at a lower fidelity and more pixelated. All right, and then simply you have non-essential assets, which are basically anything I didn't mention. It's not the ball, it's not players, it's not the crossbar, etc. It's everything else. It's the goalie net, how well that's textured. It's the stands, especially, guys. It's the seats in the stands. It's the colors of the different seats in the stands, okay? For a lot of you now playing on the 8s map, this is a reason you're stuttering. This is a reason you're lagging. This is a reason your frames might drop hard when you turn around or like shift around, especially playing at a high FPS. Because when you start to render these things in, obviously lag's gonna hit. So what this setting is doing is when you have it on epic or high and you're playing on a big field, you're actually rendering in those seats that are farther away at a higher fidelity than what you need them to be at all, right? Like, you don't even need to see the seats in the first place. If there was a way we could disable those, that would just honestly pretty rocket. But the point is simply just have this on low, guys. Just test it, play with this. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you discover something else about this, let me know. But honestly, especially if you're going into 8s, this is a setting you're going to want to have on low. Okay, you do not need to render in the non-essential objects or assets, etc., and kill your frames. You just don't need to do it. All right, so getting more out of game settings, optimization wise, I've heard some players swear by timer resolution, and this is something you can try. It's something I've looked into. You're really not gonna notice a major difference. I didn't notice any difference on my hardware, but if you have a lower end or maybe even a medium end system, maybe give it a try. Honestly, requires more testing on my part, but like, let me know what you guys think about that. All right, so this first out of game setting I'm gonna show you guys to help optimize is very simple. Basically what you're going to do for most players is just have the game open in the background. It's going to be easier than finding separate file paths. So once you have your game open in the background, go to your task manager and you're going to see Pro Soccer Online somewhere, hopefully right at the top. That means it's using, you know, the most out of your system. But wherever it is, click the drop down, and anything under this drop down, sometimes I've seen 2 processes, sometimes I've seen 4. It depends on if I have my VR open, I think, but whatever it is, whatever's under this drop down for Pro Soccer Online, right click each one of them, go to properties, go to compatibility, and you're going to want to make sure disable full screen optimizations is checked. And then you also want to go into change high DPI settings. Can't speak today, bro. And then you're also going to want to make sure this is checked, and you're going to want to scale it by application. Okay, and click apply and okay. And do that for anything underneath, because you never know what could really be the cause of it. All right, it's hard to test for, it's hard to know, but it looks like this is obviously the one that's mainly running. But I still do it for this one. I've done it for, I do it for all of them. Anything I see pop up, and I do this for all my games, guys. Any game you're running in full screen that you're serious about, that you're tryharding about, this is a setting that if you have, you'll notice it. You'll notice it, maybe not right away, but it absolutely helps with input lag and input delay. Next thing you want to do while we're here, go into details, see your Pro Soccer Online, wherever it is, and you're going to set the priority to high. Like I have it here, make sure the little dots there, set it to high if you can. And all this is doing is basically just making sure that whenever this is running, it's getting the most, like your computer's giving it all the assets it needs immediately. All these things are on normal, basically. Everything else in your system is basically running on normal priority. So when this is running on high, it's getting everything first. It's getting what it needs first in order to run as best as it can. But just note that every time you do reopen the game, this will be set to normal. I can, in a future video if you want, I can make a bat file that you would just launch, and it will launch the game, and it will also launch it in high priority. It's not that hard to make, but just for the quickness of this video, you would have to set it to high every time by going into details once the game is launched and set it to high. If that's something you want to do, I suggest doing it. Although, you know, you might forget sometimes. You might notice a difference, you might not. It really depends on your system, but I have it set to high. And then also, while we're here, let's just go into our startup real quick. And what you're going to want to do in startup is very simple. Whenever you install a program or something, especially if you're not paying attention, a lot of programs will like to start up with your computer. That's not what we want at all. Okay, it takes a lot of assets away, because then they start up with your computer and then they're also running in the background. All right, and that's not something we want. It's taking assets away from any game you're playing, etc. So just go in and disable anything that you know you're not using right away, okay, that you don't want to, run on startup, right? For instance, I have my Riot Games Vanguard on disabled. I'm not playing a lot of Valve recently, all right? But if I wanted to, I would just enable this by clicking enable, restart my computer, and then Vanguard would be on startup, and I'd be able to play Valve with my friends. Because I'm not, have it disabled for now, etc. Discord also disabled. I can just start that, guys. Like, you don't need these things. You don't need certain things starting up. If you're confused, maybe, and you don't know what you should have on startup and what you shouldn't, very simple fix to that is, if you don't know what it is, just leave it enabled. All right. If you do know what it is and you don't want it enabled, disable it. Very simple.